Republic of Peru, Tumbes, Lima, Ica, Nazca, Cusco, Ollantaytambo, Aguas Calientes, Machu Picchu, back in Cusco, and ride to Copacabana. Republic of Peru, derived from Biru, a 16th century leader. With proof we were now somewhere, thanks to the stamps fresh in our passports, a colectivo driver waved us over. Tumbes? Sí. 10 soles per persona. 10 soles? Shit, how much is that? We hadn't exchanged our USD yet, although it wasn't that the opportunity was lacking with all the money exchangers. The nice thing about Ecuador, for me selfishly, was they had recently done away with their last currency, the sucre, and replaced it with the US dollar. Ecuador had gone through epic inflation because of President Abdallah Bucaram, a.k.a. El Loco que Ama, the madman who loves. He stole a few $1,000,000 worth of sucre, doing a bit of damage to the economy of Ecuador by crushing the sucre's value. In 2000, President Yamil Mahuad announced the dollarization of the economy of Ecuador, and ever since, the US dollar has been Ecuador's official currency. I think I saw that $1 would get you about 3.6 soles. Now in Peru, I was back to math, converting dollars into Peruvian sol. With that, there was a new experience I would soon come across, the world of counterfeiters. What experience did we helpless backpackers have in what a real sol was versus a counterfeit one? They preyed on us gringos. Urban legend claimed that the word gringo stemmed from when the United States invaded Mexico in 1846. Wearing green uniforms, the Mexican people yelled, "Green, go home." In fact, the word comes from the Greek word grigo, which means Greek, which sort of means it's all Greek to me. So any foreigner speaking a language that is not understood is a gringo. We found an old man sitting in a fold-up chair, dressed in a dirty and dated tweed suit and a sun-beaten fedora. His chair sat in a patch of dirt off the side of the road. On his lap was an open briefcase full of Peruvian sols, US dollars, and various other currencies from around the world. The euro didn't start going to print for another 5 days, January 1st, 2002. I didn't really like the idea of the euro for nostalgic reasons. I liked all my German, Swiss, Austrian, Dutch, and French coins. I paid the collectivo guy 30 soles, and we were off to Tumbes, a half-hour ride even farther south. I really wanted an empanada. Tumbes. Tumbes, Tumbes, Tumbes. If you asked me what to do in Tumbes, I would say, leave. That was really not fair, actually. I didn't even give it a chance. From what I saw, it wasn't captivating. The upside of traveling with Ross and Rachel was they were open to last-minute changes, which was fine since we knew we wanted to be in Cusco by New Year's. How it happened was how it happened. 4 flights were scheduled from Tumbes to Lima for $50 US. The 1-hour, 30-minute flight would put us in Lima by 6 p.m. The flight saved us time for sure, but it meant we would skip quite a bit of what Peru had to offer. The longer you stayed anywhere, the longer you realized the amount of things there were to see and do, taste and smell, love and hate, or be completely indifferent about. One place, of the many places that we would miss, which was of particular interest to me, was the Chan Chan ruins of the Chimu people. The Chimu were considered to be the most advanced civilization in Peru before the Inca conquered them in 1470. Lima. Aeropuerto Internacional Pedro Canga Rodriguez was a large open-air rectangle room. Security was one guy with a machine gun. No metal detectors, no X-ray, a world of difference compared to my recent experiences in Panama and Venezuela. A single runway hosted a sun-beaten DC-9. Aeropuerto Internacional Jorge Chavez was not as simple, but considering it was an international hub, it certainly lacked complexity. In the main entrance/exit lobby, a replica of Chavez's Blériot 11 airplane caught my eye. It hung from the ceiling, wedged between the wall and a large column, sort of placed there as an afterthought, like the architect said while doing the punch list. Oh shit, that's right. The client wanted us to hang a Blériot 11 airplane from the ceiling. This will do. Jorge, for whom the airport was named, flew higher than any other pilot back in 1910, exceeding 8,500 feet. His biggest claim to fame was being the first person to fly over the Alps successfully with a catch. While the flight was successful, during landing, the wings broke off his Blériot 11, and he and his plane fell over 60 feet. He died 4 days later from his injuries at the age of 23. Our next tasks were as follows. First, hire taxi. Second, check into hostel. And third, find black market. Ross stayed back at the hostel to play his guitar or meet new people. He was extremely engaging. Rachel and I took a taxi down to one of Lima's black markets to acquire a couple of new music CDs and stop at a pharmacia to pick up some Valium or similar medicine, as I hadn't been sleeping. Our driver took us to what appeared to be the shadiest part of Lima. It looked as if a war had just ended. Garbage was everywhere. Homelessness was rampant. The sounds of music overlapped. Food sizzled. Autos, mopeds, and tuk-tuks honked their horns incessantly. A tent city crammed into a chain-link fence controlled by no one, filled with everything, running independently from the world outside the fence. Steam from cauldrons and grills emitted a variety of smells. Women nursed their babies and cooked. Children sat, dirty-looking and tired. I purchased some beef heart from a vendor. It was quite tasty, and I washed it down with a couple of Casquinha cervezas. It was late, 10 p.m., when we headed back to our hostel. I knew this because after 4 months of traveling, I had finally bought a watch. December 28, we jumped on a bus to Ica. We heard it was where one goes if one wanted to sandboard on sand dunes. It would be 4.5 hours before we arrived in Ica. The person who sat next to me was a 20-something-year-old Peruvian woman who was very friendly. Her name was Cory. She spoke bueno English and was headed to Santiago, Chile for a vacation. Santiago! I'll be going there in a month or so. Don't know when exactly. I want to visit the Concha y Toro vineyard. She grabbed my arm tightly, looked around with wide eyes, and put her finger over her mouth. Shh, don't say that word. What word? Concha, she whispered. Concha? I replied in my normal voice. It's the name of the vineyard. Concha y Toro. Doesn't it mean shell and bull? Not really sure of the connection between the two. She covered her face, embarrassed. No, Concha means, she pointed to her crotch, vagina. Actually, it was a bit more vulgar when used as an insult. For example, tu madre es una concha translates to, your mother is a C word. Just one border crossing away, and the name of the largest vineyard in South America took on a whole new meaning. During our flirtatious engagement, she asked to look at the stamps in my passport. I grabbed my passport, along with my cash and soon-to-be non-working debit card. She went through each page and touched each stamp as if by doing so it allowed her to experience the country. The way things were going, I was surprised she hadn't asked me to come home with her to meet her parents. My guess was she had our wedding already planned. She was an aggressive pursuer for sure. Ica. Once in Ica, I said goodbye to her and reached for my camelback on the shelf above me. It was gone. Stolen, no doubt, at one of the many stops along the way. Lifted by one of the passengers who took advantage of the fact that I was engulfed in conversation with Cory. For those of you who may not have done the backpacker thing, it's common to see backpackers wearing their big pack on their back and a small day pack, or, in my case, a camelback, the one I just bought in Boulder, in the front. 99% of the time, when I got on a bus, I sat hugging my camelback or had it tied or fastened to my leg in some way to inform me, like a fish bobber, if someone was attempting to steal it or rifle through it. Today, for whatever reason, I decided to put this pack on the above storage shelf. Just a stupid move. My CD player and collection of bootlegged CDs were gone, along with my camera that embodied all the latest technology. Had I not removed my passport, cash, and debit card, this story would have taken a completely different trajectory. The facts were these. Fact 1. My camelback was gone, along with the contents. Fact 2. There was nothing I could do about it. And fact 3. There were sand dunes to descend. As we collected our bags, Cory stood behind me and collected her suitcase. What are you doing? I thought you were going to Santiago. I want to stay with you. But you're going on vacation. I am just here for the day and then heading to Cusco for New Year's. You should continue on to your vacation. This is like vacation. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but our plans are pretty loose. We might not even stay the night here. We want to go to Nazca before Cusco. That's okay. I want to be with you now. She smiled, and we were now 4. A taxi took us to Oasis de Laguna Huacachina, where we exchanged our few soles for a piece of plywood, cut in the shape of a snowboard with 2 Velcro straps attached to it to serve as bindings. Didn't get much for the money, but then again, I didn't expect much. Not a chance in hell those Velcro bindings would hold your feet in place, but that was what made the whole event so damn entertaining. All you could do was start your descent, and then, when the Velcro gave out, you just tumbled down the dune at great speeds. Sand found its way in every crack and crevice of the human body. After 4 times up and down, it was time for a couple of beers. While sitting on a chair with my head back, taking in the sun, Cory started giving me a foot massage. While, reader, it was true I did not turn down the massage, this relationship was becoming awkward. Ross, Rachel, and I jumped in the Oasis of America in an attempt to rid ourselves of sand and dirt. Then the 4 of us took a taxi back to town to arrange a bus to Nazca. Cory suddenly changed her mind and decided to continue on to Santiago. Or so she said. She gave me a kiss and her phone number for when I got back to Lima. Returning to Lima wasn't on my radar, but then again, it wasn't not on my radar. Then the news we didn't expect to hear. All the buses to Nazca were booked. Our game plan needed to be reworked. So we sat in the Plaza de Armas thinking about options. 2 Peruvian officers were walking the plaza. For reasons still unknown, perhaps a subconscious response to my camelback being stolen, I decided to approach the 2 officers and asked if they would sell me one of their police badges. One officer laughed, but the other one wanted to know how much I would pay. $10, I answered. He thought for a moment. Perhaps 20. Done. I assumed he would just take the badge off his hat and sell it to me on the spot. Instead, he walked me over to the policia car. Ross and Rachel stayed back. The other officer joined us at the car. We drove to the police station, where the officer who was willing to sell me his badge went inside. I could see him through the window trying to take the badge off another officer's hat. Then I watched as he got caught. Returning to the car, he informed me it would be impossible. I said, $30. The two officers looked at each other, and we soon found ourselves parked in front of a residence. This happened to be the police chief's house. The chief stood in his lit doorway, listening to the officer. The chief entered his house and then returned, handed the officer something, went back inside, and shut the door. The officer returned and said, $40, and handed me the badge. I paid him the money, and he returned us back to the plaza. Policía Nacional del Peru, PNP. The motto on the badge read, Dios, Patria, Ley. God, Fatherland, Law. A group of young Peruvians watched me being released from the back of the policia car. After the police left, they approached me to inquire what was going on. I showed them the badge, and they were in shock. Every one of them offered to buy it from me. The Peruvian National Police was the largest police force in Latin America. This badge carried the same weight as having an FBI badge. Realizing there was no way I was going to sell them the badge, we told them our situation. One of the guys said, for $50, he'd drive us in his car to Nazca. We could leave immediately. We agreed to the taxi, and he disappeared, reappearing with a friend and a 1970s Dodge Coronet. I checked my watch. It was 10:27 p.m. As we left town and entered the desert, the following Blues Brothers scene came to mind. Elwood. There's 106 miles to Chicago. We've got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes, it's dark out, and we're wearing sunglasses. Joliet Jake. Hit it. Nazca was 150 kilometers south, about 93 miles. About a 2.5-hour drive. A bus ticket would have cost us $7 each, but we decided on an acceptable fare, and then there was the experience. We'd arrive sometime after 1 a.m., giving us time to find a room, sleep a little, fly around the Nazca lines, and board a bus to Cusco, just in time for New Year's. Outside of Ica, southbound on the Pan American Highway, our driver turned off the headlights. It saves gas, he said to us, looking at the rearview mirror with a smile. It wasn't the first time I've heard or seen this tactic. It could be argued that driving with the headlights off did save on gas. The alternator puts out more current to run the lights, which does, in fact, increase the work the motor does to run the alternator. The difference in gas mileage was infinitesimal. The moon was in its waxing gibbous phase, offering plenty of light as it glowed infinitely along the ancient land. It was the black taxi that I told myself in Nebraska I would not do again. But here I sat, in the back of this car with two strangers and Ross and Rachel. About an hour out, the road slowed as it weaved up and over a mountain range just north of Palpa, and a second range just south. 30 minutes after Palpa, we could see the glow of the city of Nazca. The driver looked back with a smile, pointing to the right toward a vast, empty swath of land, and said, Líneas de Nazca aquí. Nazca. Like a kid on Christmas morning, I was up at sunrise, chomping at the bit to get to the airport. I couldn't wait to see the Nazca lines. However, we had to wait, so I buttered up some toast and had a fried egg and drank a couple of cups of coffee. My stomach gurgled. I was a bit gassy, Something wasn't 100%, but Nazca lines. I had an unhealthy interest in the paranormal, mysteries of the unknown, aliens, and the like. The Nazca lines tapped into it all: telepathy, aliens, ancient astronauts. Our day consisted of two goals. First, Nazca lines. Then, bus tickets to Cusco, getting us into Cusco midday on December 31st. The airport in Nazca was designed pretty much for the sole purpose of taking tourists up a couple of thousand feet to circle the Nazca Desert and catch a glimpse of these ancient mysterious lines. I bought my ticket along with a couple of disposable cameras. The pilot flew the Cessna with precision and used his wings to point toward the different geoglyphs. Roughly 800 lines, or runways, laid out, stretching as long as 1,200 feet. It was astonishing to experience them firsthand. Why were they here? What was their purpose? Who were they built for? I wanted to go back, time travel. Understand, it was all so simple, yet so complex. Some say the lines were runways for aliens. Others say they were a religious homage to their gods. Others have hypothesized the lines pointed to underwater sources. The truth is, nobody living today knows. Maybe they are nothing more than just giant doodles. The pilot circled the flat desert. It appeared empty. Then, suddenly, like after staring at an autostereogram, images started to appear. Hummingbird, monkey, pelican, tree, spider, condor, whale, hands. And then there was the astronaut, a sort of anthropomorphic being created on the side of a hill, looking to the heavens and waving to the gods. Ancient astronauts are nothing new. Not that there is 100% proof either way. There have certainly been some head-scratching images left around the world. Throughout time, humans have documented the potential existence of aliens. For example, from around 15,000 BC, a saucer-shaped object in the cave of Peshmerel. From around 12,000 BC, a cave painting of a UFO in Nyon, France. From around 10,000 BC, the astronauts appear in Valcamonica, Italy. From around 5000 BC, a rocket ship is in a cave painting in Japan. An illustration from 776 AD shows a crusader sighting a UFO. And something unusual appears in the sky in the 1710 AD painting of the Baptism of Christ by Aert de Gelder. After the flight over the Nazca lines, we found a bus station and learned that every bus to Cusco was sold out. It appeared Cusco was a popular destination for New Year's Eve. Determined to get there, we found ourselves standing on the dirt shoulder of the Pan American Highway, thumbs out, in hopes of hitching a ride to Cusco, just 406 miles away. If ever in Peru, one of the popular delicacies is choclo con queso, that is, corn with cheese. The corn, with its oversized sweet kernels, and the cheese, salty and soft, is an amazing combination. You can find it everywhere being peddled by the Quechua children and women through partially open windows on buses. Exact change recommended. I couldn't get enough of this newfound staple. It wasn't heavy, you never really felt full, but it was satisfying and cheap. That, and I loved the salty cheese. Nibble the corn, take a bite from the block of cheese, repeat. Well, the thing was, the cheese was unpasteurized, and with that, one could get a handful of fun bacteria that caused vomiting and diarrhea. Sitting in the sun, baking in the 80-degree weather, shit got real. For real. All that unpasteurized cheese was coming for me in a medieval way. I came down with the worst diarrhea ever experienced by any person in the history of humankind. Fortunately, there was a small family-run restaurant across the Pan American. Doing all my best to stop the carnage, I rammed through the cafe's swinging doors, surprising the family preparing some sort of delicious-smelling food. I didn't have time. Baño! Tiene baño! Si, por ahí. The woman pointed to another set of cafe doors swinging at the opposite end of the room. They opened into a 3-foot by 2-foot closet with a squat toilet and offered virtually no privacy. I didn't care. For those of you who don't know what a squat toilet is, it's essentially a hole in the ground that you squat over if you happen to be taking a shit. Aside from having abruptly barged into this restaurant, I found myself with my shorts around my ankles, both hands pressed against the walls, watching the family as they watched me, how can I say this politely, evacuate into their squatter. The doors were short, exposing my head from the shoulder up and then my knees down. The mom made a sign of the cross. The 3 children looked at me laughing. I was in a cold sweat. Worse yet, there was no toilet paper. This shit was messy. I had no choice. I had to sacrifice my underwear in the name of sanitation, and I use that word very loosely. I walked back out to meet Ross and Rachel. "You made it!" Rachel yelled, laughing. "Barely. I think I need Imodium." A taxi pulled up. The driver asked if we needed a ride. He spoke English quite well, and we told him our situation. He thought about it for a while and said he would return in 10 minutes. 15 minutes later, he returned with his 2 brothers. "We will take you to Cusco. It will be $60. "Are you serious? You think 6 of us are going to fit in that car with all our gear? No way." "Yes, sure, amigo, no problemo. We put mochilas, that is, backpacks, on top with guitar." It was a 4-door hatchback Daewoo Tico. The tires on this baby were size 135/80R12. I looked out of curiosity. The distance from Nazca to Cusco was just over 400 miles. That was the same distance as, say, Amsterdam to Berlin, New York City to Montreal, Canada. The countries of Iceland, Hungary, and Portugal are half the size in distance. Add in a total elevation gain of just over 36,000 feet, if you included all the highs and lows along the way, Mauna Kea had nothing on us. Backpack strapped to the top, 48 horsepower under the hood, Ross said a little prayer, and vroom vroom, we were off to champion up and through the Andes. We stopped frequently to stretch and negotiate road conditions. It was 18 hours of driving before our taxi driver decided he didn't want to continue. I had to give him props for going this far. Between the river crossings, sketchy plank bridges, countless miles of dirt roads, and almost 1,000 pounds of passenger weight and gear, his little Tico was beat up. That didn't stop me from arguing with him, as we had paid him to take us to Cusco, not some random intersection with a petrol station. A colectivo rolled up and dropped off a couple of locals. "Cusco?" Rachel shouted at the driver. Si. He thought for a moment, trying to figure out what the gringo upcharge was. 100 soles. How much was that in US dollars? Oh, who cared? Looking around, what other options did we have? "Okay, guys, it's 100 soles each." No, señor, todo. 100 soles todo. And that's how we met the most honest man in all of Peru. Cusco. Calle Procuradores off the Plaza de Armas offered hostels and drugs. We walked up the narrow cobblestone street, decorated with graffiti, windows protected by metal grates. Drug dealers perched against the walls, whispering loudly as you walked by. "Weed. You want weed? Or Charlie? Charlie?" Which was cocaine. Checked in to our new hostel, the room was a dark, dank space with 4 metal spring beds from the early 1900s, supporting a worn-out, stained mattress, possibly also from the early 1900s. I opted to protect myself from any communal diseases the mattress might be hosting by sleeping in my sleeping bag. The 4th bed was occupied by a cheerful Israeli woman by the name of Tali. She was a travel writer for an Israeli travel magazine heading to Machu Picchu in a couple of days. It was decided right then we would all travel together to Machu Picchu. Leaving Tali to her work, Rachel, Ross, and I walked back to the Plaza de Armas. It was obvious this evening was going to escalate into a heck of a celebration come midnight. Groups of teens gathered with beer and music. The Peruvian flute bands competed over each other. Gringos from all over the world were moving targets for the locals to sell overpriced chacas or taking photos of themselves standing next to Quechuan children with a lamb. A pickpocket's paradise. Robin and Nikki, who I met in Mexico and traveled with in Guatemala, were here. I decided to find them, agreeing to meet Ross and Rachel in the plaza at 4 p.m. I connected with Robin and Nikki. Robin had her boyfriend, or fiancé, with her. He had flown out for the week from London to spend New Year's with her. They had just returned from Machu Picchu, so we went to celebrate our reunion with a cocktail at a little nameless place near their hostel. When we entered the bar, there was no one there, not even a bartender. We sat at the bar, reminiscing. Robin told her boyfriend/fiancé about my una vie y una vie story. "Whatever happened to Gabby?" they asked. Last email I got from her was that she met a Russian guy who she couldn't stand, but he had a pickup, so she travels for free with him. She will only ride in the back because he is so annoying. She is somewhere in South America. What about Paul? Paul's back in Canada. Still no bartender. I stood up, walked behind the bar, and leaned on the counter. "What do you want?" "I'll have a martini," Nikki said. "Oh, I'll have a Pimm's," said Robin. "A Pimm's? Nope, you get a martini." "Make that too," the boyfriend/fiancé chimed in. It was closing in on 4 p.m., and I had to meet Ross and Rachel. "Where do you think we'll run into each other next? London? Hong Kong? Goa?" The question was left unanswered as we hugged goodbye. The bartender never did show up. "Cory got a great idea," Rachel said. "Let's go buy food and hand it out to the homeless." Looking around the plaza, it was not hard to miss, but easy to ignore, the poor destitute mothers with their dirty-faced children, wrapped in worn-out blankets with a small tray presented to a passerby, hoping to collect change. An arm out, the mother's sorrow was weaved on their faces. Yeah, that is a fantastic idea. We found the nearest panaderia and loaded up with as much bread, rolls, pastries, whatever they had left at the end of the day. We could only carry so much at a time, so we returned again and again until there were no more bread, rolls, or pastries to buy. When darkness came, the plaza lit up. All cars were removed but one, a regrettable oversight on the owner's part, whose car would be trampled on throughout the night. First, it started with the occasional bottle rocket. Then the bottle rockets became more and more frequent. Children were running around, pan fluters were fluting, Music was coming out of every open-air restaurant and bar. The stores were bustling with tourists buying pan flutes, alpaca hats, blankets, coats that they would never wear again, and T-shirts to prove they were here. The bottle rockets graduated into packs of fireworks snapping. Ground spinning and fountain fireworks went off randomly in the street and in the plaza. I saw a group of kids drinking bottles of wine and asked Rachel to make a photo with me sitting with them. Midnight approached, and things became louder. And suddenly, with just a minute to go, like a well-orchestrated dance line, everyone started running around the plaza in a circle. The car received more unwanted trampling. It was a Latin American tradition to run around the plaza, apparently to bring good luck. We joined in, and afterward Rachel grabbed me and gave me a kiss. That was the limit to our physical relationship. Some friendships were better that way. It was now the dawn of 2002, and in all the craziness, Ross informed us his passport and traveler's checks had been stolen. It was not uncommon to have your pocket or backpack slashed by a razor blade, almost unnoticeable when you're packed in a large group. Ross's pocket had been slashed. The next morning, over breakfast, plans were altered and decisions made. We'd all go to Machu Picchu. Our original plan was to head to Bolivia after that. We discussed smuggling Ross into Bolivia and then finding the U.S. Embassy in La Paz, where he could acquire a new passport. We thought about how immigration had been easy to avoid when we entered Peru. Perhaps the border into Bolivia was equally as uncontrolled. Ross didn't want to risk being turned away at the border and booked a flight to Lima. Ollantaytambo. With our new game plan loosely held together with spit and a prayer, the four of us jumped into a colectivo to the town of Ollantaytambo. We found a cozy cottage-esque, simple stucco building, Spanish tile roof, crowned with 2 ceramic cows. I never noticed this before. I looked around, and it appeared most homes had ceramic cows on top of them. ¿Qué son esos? I asked our hostess, who was a short, round Quechuan woman with a big smile and a gold front tooth. ¿Cómo? ¿Qué son esos? I asked, pointing at the cows. Buena suerte, she responded. I had no clue what buena suerte meant, and figured I never would. But then Ross chimed in. She said they were for good luck. Dude, you know Spanish? Yeah, pretty fluent. Why have you been letting me struggle for the past few days? How else were you going to learn? You're doing fine. He smiled. The town was nestled in a flat valley, offering plenty of opportunity for agriculture. The ruins looked down upon the town as ghostly protectors. Trails zigzagged up the steep mountainsides to the tops of the peaks and beyond. Agricultural terraces stepped perfectly up the base of the mountains. Engineering achievement after engineering achievement. The Templo del Sol was west, on the edge of town. The stonework was impossibly precise. The scale and simple complexity of it all was fascinating. Single stones weighing hundreds, if not thousands of tons, somehow cut and moved into place with no tool marks. Below, just to the southwest, was the pyramid of Pakari Tampu. This is where I get uncontrollably excited, and to share the reason for my excitement, I would like to introduce you to Brian Forster, an expert on Incan society, and share his discovery regarding the pyramid. This intriguing structure is rarely, if ever, shown by the guides to Ollantaytambo, mainly because most of them don't even know it's there. And no one, in all of the research I have done, has a clue who made it or when. On the winter solstice of each year, June 21st, the rays of the rising sun enter and strike the right of one of two windows of the pyramid. This coincides, more or less, with the celebration of the Inti Raymi, which is the Inca celebration of the rebirth of the sun, and the history of the whole Inca civilization. According to the Salazar's interpretation of this event and effect, quote, the sun's light entering this space symbolizes the union between the sky and the earth, and the illumination of its heroes is a product of its communion, which is why they were called the Sons of the Sun. Quote. Hence, the name House of Dawn has a double meaning. Typical of many oral traditions, dawn as in morning, more specifically the morning of the display of the solstice, and dawn as in place and time of origins of a people, the Inca in this case. Reader, I'll let you take a moment and let that soak in. Ancient civilizations plus masters of astronomy plus masters of stone, earth, and water equals ancient astronauts? Just tossing it out there. In the eyes of tourism, and the very reason why we were here, the town now served as a jumping-off point to catch the train to Aguas Calientes, the next stop along the way to Machu Picchu. It also serves as the starting point for those hiking the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. Now, reader, if you hadn't guessed this already, your hero avoided guided tours as much as possible, and the Inca Trail required a guide. I could not bring myself to hire someone, knowing I am capable of doing the hike self-supported and on my own. I'm not a snob. I do respect a few of the objections to my objection of hiring a guide. First, hiring a guide generates economic growth for the community. Second, hiring a guide prevents littering and damage to the ruins. And third, hiring a guide limits the number of people who hike the trail, which helps keep the trails in good repair. Tolly decided to head up the task of buying train tickets. We gave her a little more than what was needed, as we didn't have exact change. Standing about 5'2", you could tell Tolly was a feisty one. Being Israeli, she probably had a few kills under her belt from her mandatory military service. Undoubtedly, she could survive off dirt and piss, and I was sure she was a master of Krav Maga. So when the woman in the booth selling us tickets gave her counterfeit money in change, Talia went ballistic. "Falso! Falso!" she screamed, pounding the window with her fist and holding up the counterfeit bills with her non-pounding hand at the woman's eye level. A police officer came over and soon realized he was no match for a pissed-off former Israeli military soldier who was just handed counterfeit money. A few nods of his head to the woman in the booth, and she exchanged the money for real soles. Just like that, Talia was like, "Cool, let's grab a beer and jump on the train." As if nothing ever happened. I don't even know how she knew it was counterfeit, but she did. We were now on a train, beer in hand. Aguas Calientes. Riding on the train to Aguas Calientes was exciting. I like trains. I like trams and roller coasters and subways or metros. Where I live, none of these were offered, so being on a train was fun. In 2000, I flew to Florida and ran the Disney Marathon, then flew to Panama City, Panama. From there, I spent a month wandering around Central America, finishing in Cancun. Then I flew to New Orleans and ran the Mardi Gras Marathon. I then took the Amtrak for 3 days from New Orleans to Minneapolis by way of Chicago. And you know what? I loved it. What I didn't love, or perhaps it just really spooked me, was when we arrived in Aguas Calientes and disembarked the train. Standing on the platform, somehow knowing I was on this train, perhaps by the use of some sort of witchcraft, was Cory. the Peruvian woman who I thought was on her way to Santiago. Ross and Rachel looked at me, sucked in their lower lips, and widened their eyes as if to say, "Oh boy, good luck with that." With a smirk, Ross said, "Yeah, okay, so we'll just meet you at the hostel." Tolly had no clue what was going on and was not one to involve herself in someone else's business. She just waved at me and went off with Ross and Rachel. "So, Santiago is a no-go?" "I had to see you again. I have been here for 2 days. What has taken you so long?" She almost seemed angry. "What took me so— How did you get here so fast? All the buses were sold out, and I saw you leave south on the bus." "I flew from Arequipa. It is only less than 1 hour flight." "Huh? Why didn't we think of that?" I suppose it seemed counterintuitive to continue on the bus heading further away from our destination, but it would have saved us a day, or, according to Cory, 2 days. "So, do you want to maybe grab a beer?" She smiled and held my hand. "I am staying at a hostel nearby. You will stay with me tonight?" Now, normally I would jump at the chance for a little frisky business, but at this point, I was so weirded out by her being here, I didn't think I would have had any fun. I had to dig deep to remember how I escaped uncomfortable encounters in the past. Usually, I had my own car, so escape was easy. But here, I was trapped in a town where the only mode of escape was a scheduled train. The town wasn't that big, and she clearly had the grit and staying power to starve me out. Besides, her black magic would have found me. I didn't stand a chance. I ripped the Band-Aid off with a poorly developed story. "Do you remember Rachel? Well, she and I decided to start a relationship after you left." "No, I don't believe it. Her boyfriend is Ross. I can see this." "No, Ross is her brother. The woman that was with us on the train, she is Ross's girlfriend. She met us in Cusco." What a web I was weaving. But after racking up a bit of a bar tab, she either finally believed me or simply conceded. She left me with the tab, and I left her with a broken heart. I gave the group the Cliff Notes version of what I had told her. Rachel gave me a big hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Don't mean to cock-block ya," she said. "That was the right play," I said. That night, Tolly, Ross, Rachel, and I climbed into our individual beds in our shared room and shut out the lights. Tolly broke the dark silence with a question. "Have you guys ever done a dream walk?" Ross, Rachel, and I all replied with a no. Tally then told us she was going to lead us on one. "Okay, let's do this," she said, and instructed us to lie flat on our backs and close our eyes. Then she began. "Imagine you are walking on a path in the woods. What does the path look like? What do the woods look like? You come to a stream and cross it. What does the stream look like? How do you cross it?" This went on for about 10 minutes. Afterward, Tolly told us that each of our answers represented significant things in our lives and how we perceived those things. Then we shared our dream walks. I went last. When I finished, everyone was silent for a long minute until Rachel chuckled and said, "Dude, that was pretty psychedelic. Did you used to take a lot of drugs?" Machu Picchu, ancient mountain. We were up early, and it was still dark. The trailhead up to the top was just over a mile away. It was around 50 degrees Fahrenheit and would only reach perhaps 70 at today's apex. The climb up through the jungle was steep as we pressed up the ancient staircase. Hundreds of years ago, Inca found, cut, and shouldered these massive steps into place along the steep mountainside. To complain about the ascent would be an insult. The top reached and the entrance gained, we found ourselves amongst a few others who had reached the guardhouse, which was one of the well-established structures on the site and the recommended viewpoint for sunrise. It was a bit cloudy, but really, I was sitting at one of the most epic ancestral locations in the world. A few clouds weren't going to dampen my mood. They added to the mystique. Terraces, towers, walls, and doorways with no sense of rhyme or reason held together with no mortar, just perfectly cut stones. And amongst them, llamas grazed in the pastures while tour groups followed their leader, who carried flags. The scale was fantastic. The whole estate rested in a saddle that was overlooked by Huayna Picchu, home to the high priest and his collection of virgins, or so saith the legend. What can I say that hasn't been said of Machu Picchu? Epic stonework, engineering designed to embrace earthquakes. I'm not going to say it. Just not going to. Okay, ancient astronauts? Climbing to the top of Huayna Picchu was a one-time must for your hero who enjoys la pelle de vide. I would be lying if I told you I wasn't petrified as I reached the top and descended back down, but the view was monumental. I could go on about the site, but as your guide of this story, I will encourage you, if you have not yet been, to have your own Machu Picchu experience. Our exploration came to an end 6 hours later. The monumental views over, we began to descend the same ancient stairway. There were 13 switchbacks up and down the carretera here in Bingham Road that took thousands of tourists from the Aguas Calientes to Machu Picchu and back daily by bus. The road snaked up the side of a steep mountain and cut through the Inca staircase that we opted to ascend and descend. I came across a young boy who was running down the stairs to meet the tourist buses at each bend. I decided to join him. You could see the older passengers in awe as they came around each switchback to see me and the boy standing there, waving. We returned to our hostel in Aguas Calientes, grabbed our packs, and headed to the train station. The train back to Cusco should have been time for reflection on where we had just been, humbled by such an important ancient location. Instead, we bumped into a couple of rowdy Australians who I immediately warmed up to. Mate, let's climb outside the train and ride on the roof. They weren't asking us. They were in the process of climbing out the window and were telling us to join them. Tolly was third, and then I followed. So, to answer the question asked by my parents, teachers, and authority figures for decades, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you? We now know my answer. Back in Cusco. One more night in Cusco. We walked around Plaza de Armas one last time, searching for where we might enjoy our last supper. After hearing about my acquisition of the Peruvian police badge, my Uncle Johnny, an avid hat collector, emailed me asking if I could get him a Peruvian police hat. 2 police officers oversaw the plaza, and I approached them. Along the lines of, if you don't ask, you don't get, I asked the officers if they would sell me their cap with the badge. One walked away, the other took 50 soles and asked me to give him my name and hostel. Worst case, I was going to be out 50 soles. After dinner, I decided to buy some patches to repair my backpack at one of the many stores catering to gringos. A large bowl filled with patches of flags from all over the world sat on a table next to alpaca sweaters. Maybe I'll get one for each country I've been to and stitch them on my backpack. How much is a flag? $3 American. $3? That seemed high. I had just dropped 50 soles on a hat I might not ever get. Okay, my friend. 3 for $10. 3 for $10? How is that a good deal? How about 4 for $10? I bought a total of 13 and wouldn't sew Bolivia, Chile, or Argentina on until I got there. Back at the hostel, on the counter, was a package wrapped carefully in brown paper tied with a string to Senor Mortensen. In it was a Peruvian police hat with a badge. Ross headed back to Lima to get a new passport. Tolly went south to Arequipa, and Rachel and I headed to Copacabana. It would be over 10 hours in a bus before we arrived in Copacabana. I grabbed a book from the Take One, Leave One shelf. Lost Horizon by James Hilton. Ride to Copacabana. The bus was fine, though cramped and full of stinky backpackers and stinky locals. But had I known there was a train, I would have paid top dollar for that experience. I was lost in my new book. It connected with my current journey. Slightly different, slightly the same. An adventure that turned into more. From Cusco, the first 109 miles took us up to an elevation of 14,222 feet, where the region of Cusco ended. The region of Puno began, and the bus stopped for a short break. Perhaps a ruse to get us to buy from the 15 or so Quechua women selling alpaca jackets, sweaters, blankets, ponchos, rugs, and hats. A few unshaven alpacas wandered the plains, brought there for the sake of the tourist. Okay, here comes a bus. Release the alpacas, the Quechua women would shout to each other as the bus's hydraulic brakes hissed to a stop. I really wanted some water as I had drunk my Nalgene dry. The Nalgene bottle was sort of a trophy case many backpackers cherished. Stickers were how one could show off how much they'd traveled without saying a word. Oh, I see you've been to Rio de Janeiro. The sticker on the Nalgene told me this without having to engage. We pulled into Puno late in the night or early in the morning. My watch stopped working, and apparently the idea was that we all just sleep on the bus for a couple of hours without the option of getting off. At this point, I didn't bother asking questions about why this or that happened. You just sort of had to know things would work out. It was better to enjoy the experience and appreciate how good you had it where you came from. Unless where you came from runs worse than a Peruvian-Bolivian bus line.